Brandi Kruse is here to talk about all the love she's getting online right now. Can you feel the love? Can you feel the love? Because, okay, here's a headline from my old station. Legislation focused on safeguarding runaway youth seeking protected health services, clear state house. I mean, who doesn't want legislation focused on safeguarding runaway youth? I mean, everybody wants to safeguard runaway youth. So what's your problem, Brandi? Why do you keep getting tweets like this from Derek Young? Apparently, this is what you have to do to cash those right-wing checks, Brandi. I mean, to say Brandi, but he's replying to you basically. The bill is to protect kids fleeing abuse, but the nuts are out and the money is to be made. So you're just a nutcase who's trying to get some Benjamins here. And this is what you say. I'll repeat, it is not an extremist position to want to know where your child is at night. Don't let them bully you into believing it is. You are not extremist. This is their tried and true tactic. Once it loses effectiveness, they have nothing, absolutely nothing. Okay, so let's go back to this. What is this bill? It's SB 5599, and it's according to King 5 Mild Station, they just want to safeguard runaway youth. So what's your problem, Brandi?
Yeah, well, I guess in a very tame reading of the bill, I suppose that could be considered what it does. And that's what proponents of it have tried to make it seem is it's this harmless, if it's just about making sure that kids aren't homeless, they're not sleeping on the street. So Senate Bill 5599, and I say this completely absent hyperbole, it's one of the most dangerous pieces of legislation I've ever covered in 12 years covering politics in Washington state. And what Senate Bill 5599 would do is if you are a child of any age and you decide that you want protected health care under Washington state law. So that might be gender affirming care, as they call it. It might be reproductive care. You can, and let's say your parents won't let you get it. You can run away to a shelter, tell them you're there to get protected health care. And by law, that shelter will not and cannot tell your parents where you are.
Okay, can you explain what is the reproductive care? Is that abortion? Because I was confused about that.
Yes. Yeah. Reproductive care would be like birth control or abortion. And then gender care would be anything the state allows under law for someone under the age of 18. So it might be gender hormone therapy, for instance. And, there are other things included in that, but I think the most common one would be gender hormone therapy as a child.
Mhm. Okay, so what happens then? Like, let's just say the kid runs away, ends up at a shelter. I also saw that they could put you in like foster care or something, some kind of shelter home. And then what? I mean, do you just become a ward of the state, or like what happens to you?
So the idea is that you can be there, and I call it government sanctioned kidnapping of your kids. You can be there. The shelter will not tell your parents where you are. So for all you know, your parent's dead or your child's dead or they've been kidnapped or something. And you're there to seek protected health care. So while you go about trying to get the health care that you say you want, there is no limit. There is no time. And that's part of the questions and the pushback of this is, okay, are you going to keep them can they stay at the shelter till they're 18? Is there ever a point where we get to know where our child is? And so I think there's a lot about this that hasn't been thought through, but Democrats will say that if you push back against this, you dare question whether it's the erosion of parental rights, that you hate trans kids and you want trans kids to kill themselves.
Okay. Yeah. Well, is that because the media, like the local news, my lovingly my loving old boss here, I guess my boss is not still there, but my I lovingly say this is what I'm trying to say, not really. I'm just trying to be nice because I couldn't believe some of these headlines. Is it because they're just giving it all a pass, and so everyone, there just hasn't been enough debate over it? Is that why people think that's those are the two sides? You either hate kids or you love kids, and if you're on the side of not safeguarding kids, then you just hate kids. I mean, the only thing I saw here is like this last part. I mean, this is it. The opposers of the bill say current laws already outlaw abuse, and this would take too much power away from parents. We certainly want to protect children, but we think this bill goes too far in taking loving parents away from important, significant decisions that parents are making. Washington Republican Party Chairman Caleb Heimlich said, this is in the bill that if a teen runs away and a loving parent is trying to find where their teen is at, the state will not tell them And as a parent, that is terrifying. I mean, that's it. I mean, the whole rest of it is pretty supportive of it. So, I mean, what's the role of the local news in giving people this idea, I guess, that that's the dichotomy. You are either just like, you're a pro kid or you hate kids.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, that's a huge part of it. Is I think there's a couple things going on here, and you could probably attest to this. I don't think local TV stations are particularly good at nuance or anything really in depth. And so I think when they see this bill pushed as helping runaway youth, that's just sort of what they go with. I also think there's a hesitancy to discuss transgender issues because they just see it as this hot button topic. And for them, it's too controversial to even raise this suggestion or platform someone who might suggest that kids shouldn't get life-altering surgeries without parental consent before the age of 18. So I think that local TV stations are just completely incapable of discussing controversial topics like that with the nuance that I think it demands in order for the public to be fully informed on the issue. So I think those are a couple of things. But you brought up a good point, and that's really how I want people to think about this, is what this does for the state of Washington is it would put physical or sexual abuse of a child on the same tier as a parent who wants to have a say in whether their child gets gender care. So basically, it's Democrats saying if you don't let your kid get gender care, that's the same as abuse. And when you think about the slippery slope, for instance, in this state, if you abuse a child and the state takes them away, you still, as a parent, maintain certain rights until the formal process is done to strip you of your parental rights. In this instance, if you're a parent who wants to have a say in your child's health care, like, parents who abuse their kids almost have more rights under the system if Senate Bill 5599 passes. And I wonder, Allison, what could come next. If the state is saying in this bill that not wanting your kid to get gender care is the same as abuse, what would stop the state then from passing a law that says they can come into your home and take your child away from you if you won't let them get gender care, because they're putting it on the same playing field as abuse? And so that's the really slippery slope that we're going down.
Well, no, totally. I was trying to find I'm trying to find where they're getting this wording from, this whole safeguarding youth, because it seems like it reads as if it's been pushed out as a press release like that, because it follows a lot of the same language, and so I think this was the original sponsor here, Marco Lias or Lias. I'm not sure how you say his name. Lias.
Yep, Lias.
So, because since you brought up, like, they don't often like read through bills or think about consequences necessarily. And if the press release just comes out and says like, we're doing this to protect kids, and it tends to align with sort of the viewers or the reporter's confirmation bias, then I think they just kind of run with the same language. I was just trying to figure out, I mean, I just see, the legislation gives meaningful choices to young people who may not have supportive families at home, so they do not end up on the street, but instead have shelter options when seeking this life-saving care.
Yeah, and can I just really about that is they suggest, and I did this whole like 20-minute segment just dismantling some of their floor speeches on this, because they suggest that without this law, if you're a child and you run away from home to get this care, you're automatically going to be homeless, that there is no other option. And that doesn't make any sense. There are, of course, shelters. That's not the question of whether these shelters exist. They already exist. The question is, and what the law does, is prevent shelters from contacting parents. And so you could still today, if you're a child, run away to, and I hope you don't, but run away to a shelter to say, hey, I want to get this care that's protected under the law. And that shelter, you can be there, but the shelter is going to call your parents. The only thing this law is going to change is it's going to take away that element that your parents get to know where you are. And that's egregious. And also to suggest that you can't be a loving parent and still want to say in your child's medical care is so incredibly insulting from some of these state lawmakers. Marco Lias gave a speech when this was going through the committees, and I had to play it back like a dozen times because I couldn't believe he said it. He basically said, I look forward to the day where every child in Washington state has a loving, caring home. Until then, it's our job to provide those spaces for them, referring to transgender youth.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the government's job. And again, to think that a parent can't be loving while also wanting a say in their child's medical care is a pretty egregious thing for lawmakers to say.
I saw that somebody I think it was on your Twitter page I'm looking for it, where somebody said something about how they'll do as well with the kids that run away as they have with all like the homelessness and everything.
Yeah.
It's basically, it'll just be the same. They'll do just as well taking care of the kids, as the adult homeless population in Seattle. And what could go wrong? Basically, I can't find the tweet,
Yeah.
but yeah, what a crazy. I don't know. I think even if I were to like put my bias in about it, which clearly I agree with you. I mean, I totally agree with everything you've said. But even if I took my bias out of it, I still think this is so crazy to see these headlines that they just say this, that it's just focused on safeguarding runaway youth. I mean, I don't know how is this like, who's reading these headlines? I just don't understand. This would be so crazy to me. I just don't know how this is this is my whole station.
Well, it's just
Sadly.
it is parroting the Democratic talking points. It's parroting the talking points of the sponsors of the bill, which is not the job of the press. There's, presenting this with the only criticality they're using is a quote from the Washington State Republican Party chairman, as if what
Right.
he's saying is only an opinion. No, what he's saying is factual. And the news should be okay saying, like, here's what this would do. Allison, 4,500 people, 4,500, mostly parents in opposition to Senate Bill 5599, signed up to testify at a hearing on it. And you know as well as I do, to get 4,500 people to sign up. So you have parents who are trying to spread the word about this on their own because they realize we can't trust the press to do it anymore. We
Mhm.
certainly can't trust the majority party who's pushing this bill to tell us the truth about what it does. And so kudos to some of the parents who've been saying, okay, I guess this is up to us to try to get the truth out there about the bill. But like you said, even if even in a world where journalists were doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing and telling both sides of the story, the stories that you you showed me, they fall far short of that goal of even just the basic level of explaining what the bill does.
Okay, I need a drink. Do
Yep.
you?
I was gonna say it's about time.
Don't forget, everybody, if you like hearing from people like Brandi, go to AllisonWinePromo.com and get an amazing Malbec. If you're already a wine drinker, you have no excuse. You get 50% off wines that are not in your grocery store. And why would you want to get them at the grocery store anyway when you can support my work and have a great bottle of wine? Mother's Day is coming up. You know what? All these mothers out there that aren't going to, you know what? I can't even make a joke about it. I was going to say, all these mothers that are like, they can't believe what's happening in Washington. I'll word it that way. They can't believe it's Washington. Washington State mothers need a drink right now. So go get your Washington State mother a nice bottle of Malbec. These are high altitude, extremist altitudes. Brandi is an extremist. You just saw it on Twitter. Okay. She got called a right wing money making grifter extremist. So in honor of Brandi, go. You know what? I'll name the middle one the Brandi for today. Just for
Okay, good.
today. It's 8,200 feet. Okay, Argentina's oldest vineyard. We're gonna take it. We're not gonna call it the Unoak. We're gonna call it the Brandi. So go get yourself the Brandi. Get 50% off the wine, 50% off shipping. Keep me in business, and and you get a complimentary bottle on top of it. If you're a coffee drinker, you can also go to twinenginecoffee.com/Allison. These are USDA certified organic roast, high altitude as well. Extremist altitude. There's light roast. There's dark roast. As I've been saying, I drink a lot of the espresso now. Every morning I'm having my raw milk espresso latte. I put a little bit of amaretto. Actually, no. Well, amaretto is almond extract and vanilla extract. If you didn't know, I didn't know that's what an amaretto is, but I put them together with some raw cocoa powder. I make it at home. You cannot get that at Starbucks. Why would you want to? Again, if you're already a coffee drinker, you have no excuse. twinenginecoffee.com/Allison. Keep me in business. Keep people like Brandi coming on. Okay. Remember, everybody, too. Are you on Locals, Brandi? Remind me.
Yeah, I do Locals platform, or Patreon's my bigger platform, but I'm on Locals as well.
Okay. So go find Brandi on Locals if you're there. But also, if you are on my Locals editorial board, you get to pose questions ahead of time for interviews. So I'm going to go to them really quick. Let's just like do a hot seat here. Okay.
Okay.
Um, who pays for the treatments? Does the state pay, or do the parents suddenly get a medical bill?
Yeah, the parents would get a medical bill.
Okay. Wow. So that's okay. That's freaking That's just like extortion, dude. How is that even possible? That you get a medical bill and you don't even know what's going. What if your kid ends up in the emergency room after these surgeries are botched?
Yeah, yeah, and then your parent doesn't know where they are. I will say that in Washington State, it's been the law for a few years that there are a lot of medical procedures kids over 13 can opt to do themselves, and get
Uh,
medication, etc. And they still are being billed to the parent's insurance, but the parent couldn't call and say, "What is this? What is this prescription for?" Because they wouldn't have a right to know.
yeah, I saw Jason Rance. This is not it, but I saw he had an article about something, I guess, a few months ago that passed where you can go get these treatments without telling your parents, right? So you don't have to do that. This is just the latest step in that. In other words, this is not necessarily that new. I guess the movement in this direction.
Yeah, well, the idea would be that you could run away from home and disappear and be at one of these shelters and show back up at home a month later, and you've
Yeah,
undergone one of these procedures or gotten medical care, and your parents had no clue
yeah.
where you were the whole time. Yeah.
Has the reporter looked into what money is involved in pushing for this legislation? Who is going to pay for all of this future medicalization? Well,
Yeah.
let's stick with that one, the money behind the legislation. Who funds this guy?
Well, I don't know who funds Marco Lias. I'm assuming the same people who fund a lot of these uber progressive politicians, which would be labor unions. That's where they get most of their money to run. So that's a good question. And I should be going back and looking at Marco Lias's latest bid to see who's funding his campaign. But my guess is the same who fund all the progressives, and that's the labor movement.
Considering the children coming forward who regret the surgery, there would be, isn't this a huge liability problem?
I mean, I would think so. I would think so. And I also think, there are two distinct debates that we can have about Senate Bill 5599. One of the debates that we can have is about parental rights and why are we continuing toward this movement and this creeping intrusion into the household? And isn't it healthier to have parents involved in their kids' lives? What would make you think it's better for a child's mental health to go to a shelter and stay there without any communication with their parents and go through these really, probably traumatizing things without their parents being involved? And then there's the separate conversation of, should we really be performing some of these procedures on children who are so young? And so that is a totally worthwhile debate that the mainstream media is simply not
Right.
capable of engaging in an honest
Mhm.
way. And yeah, I do wonder, hey, like if you come back 10 years later, your child's like, hey, I don't want to do this anymore. Here's the long-term implications. The state allowed me to run away to a shelter and
Mhm.
essentially kidnap me from my parents, and now I'm going to
Mhm.
sue. A hundred
Mhm.
percent. Yeah.
My feeling is that a lot of people in the Western Washington area and the Seattle market really have no clue the variety of dissent within, and I don't even want to call it the LGBTQ community because it doesn't even, that doesn't really fit because like, you see plenty of, well, there's like a lot of people don't even know, like there's the LGB movement now. They don't even want to be a part of T, there's like, they're dissolving. Like, we don't want to be a part of T anymore. And I mean, there's a lot of, there's just a lot of variety out there. And I think what the reporting makes it seem like once again is that it's like you're either anti-gay people or kids or whatever, or pro. And actually they're like, I was just talking to a friend of mine who's like so scared of Florida. She lives in the Seattle area and so scared of Florida, and because they hate gay people. And like, I have a gay friend in Miami who moved to Florida because he loves the policies in Florida and loves Ron DeSantis. I mean, a lot of people don't understand, like, there are a lot of gay people out there that, think that what's happening right now is totally nuts. So I don't know, just throwing that out there, like, I don't think they have a good pulse on the what's happening, I guess. They just put all the LGBTQA plus all of those people, like they just all agree with each other. Like there's like, oh yes, I am LGBTQ and I believe whatever everybody says the same thing. We all think it's just so dumb. All right. What proof will they need to say these kids are in a protected class? I would think this would be an excuse for many who do not want their parents notified. Yeah, because it says something like if they're in a protected class. So, like, what does that exactly mean, and how do you prove that?
Well, I mean, you just have to show up and say, I'm here to seek protected health care. You don't have to prove to them that you are actually doing it. That's just what you have to utter. And then there are some other, if you're claiming child abuse, for instance, you show up at a shelter, that's when police get involved. So that would be a harder thing to kind of lie about. But if you're saying I'm seeking protective health care, how are they going to question that? Are they going to follow you to the doctor's office? Probably not. And that's one of the concerns, is that you'll just have kids who want to get away from their parents, because who doesn't? And then they'll go to a shelter because their friends tell them to do it. And then they'll all be at the shelter and nobody will know where they are.
What a mess.
It's such
Okay,
a mess.
the bill's initial sponsor, Senator Marco Elias, has an interesting background. A graduate of Jesuit Georgetown University, openly homosexual, and a David Bonnet LGBTQ Victory Institute Leadership Fellow who ran for lieutenant governor in 2020. What are his future odds of winning higher office?
Yeah, he ran for lieutenant governor, and he wasn't quite as extreme at the time. I mean, I remember interviewing him, and he was certainly the more progressive option, but I didn't find him as particularly extreme. I think he's too progressive to win a statewide race. Even in Washington, I still think that folks aren't quite ready for that. But I don't know what his future ambitions are, but he clearly didn't win the lieutenant governor's race, so maybe he's better off just staying put.
Yeah, but look at this. I mean, I don't know. He might take this as a sign that he's got to try again. All right, Blaine, I hear echoes of the Democrats a couple decades ago saying your children don't belong to you, they belong to the community. Let's go, Brandi, and remind her to drive safely, engaging hands-free, since you are in your car.
I am parked. I'm parked with a dying cell phone. Just a warning.
And LOL, Brandi right wing. That is insane. Yeah, Brandi's, she's an extremist. I'm going to just find one last tweet here before you go. Just because I just want to show people what you have to deal with.
Yeah, and while you find that, I'll just say this is their tactic. And this is what I try to preach on the Undivided podcast, is to just be brave and realize what it is they're trying to do. They know, and this guy who attacked me, he knows that labeling someone in Seattle right wing or right wing not is what you need to do to try to alienate them and to try to get people to trust them less. And so as soon as you just absolutely reject it and don't take their bait, they lose all their power, because they can't win on the merits. They can't win with a fact-based, reasoned conversation. So they have to resort to, oh, you're right wing. And it's the way they dismiss everything.
This is really good. Regularly crying fascism while simultaneously defending government takeover of the home on ideological grounds is a really weird fetish. Dude, that's deep. That's deep. If you're not
right?
Say it again.
I said, right? It's like, that is these people who are like fascist about Trump and DeSantis. Then they're like, oh yeah, but I want the government raising my kids. Like, what?
That's really a good point. Okay, everybody go follow Brandi on the internet. She's at Brandi Kruse, Brandi with an I. Help her. She's getting married soon. She needs some extra dough. Go subscribe to her Patreon, her locals. Where else should people follow you? Tell us about when you do your show and everything, so they know what they're getting themselves into.
Yeah, so you can go to undividedpod.com, and it's a one-stop shop to find how to watch, listen. We do 4 live shows a week at noon, Monday through Thursday. And I call it, political commentary for the anti-fringe, people who are absolutely fed up of the two-party system, working for parties and not people. I'm kind of consider myself an aggressive independent. And so we try to cover these issues in a way that challenges our own kind of echo chamber, but also that rejects these false narratives that are meant to divide us on the basis of race and gender. We see too much of that in the media. And so it's really about not just ignoring those things, but a forceful rejection of these blatant efforts to divide us that the mainstream media buys into.
Hey, Brandi, one last other quick question. Oh, yeah, and congratulations to Engagement Wedding Brandi. $5. I'll send you the $5. You can buy a little napkin or something, put my name on it. Okay, if this is what is on menu for politicians of future, would not aggressive litigation against any bill coming out be more of a ROI for people willing to engage rather than campaigning? I don't know what you think about. I don't know what you would sue against, but I will say this much. I'm starting to get really tired of what seems like the government just passing whatever BS law it wants. And then we, the taxpayer have to sue like all the time. It just feels like
Mhm.
that's all we do anymore is it's just this dance of like, let's just do this. And then we're like, wait a second. And then those of us outside the government offices are like, wait a second, that violates the Constitution, or that's illegal for this reason or illegal for that reason. And then we have to pay their attorneys' fees, because they get the attorney general to represent them. And then we have to pay our attorneys' fees. And it just seems like a big scam. So it's just a big scam. I just don't understand. I don't know. That's my final word
Mhm.
on the topic. I don't know if you can even sue over a bill that hasn't made it to to law yet. I don't know what you would sue
Well,
over.
once the
But
governor signed it, I know some people are going to. I don't know what the grounds are, the constitutional basis. We'll have to wait and see on that. But I agree. And Democrats have pushed through some things knowing that they will go on to be challenged by the courts, and they're okay with that. You just saw it with the tax on capital gains, which is an unlawful income tax, but they found a sympathetic court and they prevailed. You just saw them ban so-called assault weapons in Washington state. They know that it's going to be challenged on constitutional
mhm.
grounds, but they
Mhm.
really aren't concerned. So it always freaks me out when you have people who, swear an oath who aren't concerned about violating the Constitution, which I tend to think says a lot about their character and about their motivations.
Hey, did you bring up the fact that this could open the door to for any kind of medical treatment? Like, what if we have another pandemic or something, and you're a parent who thinks, I don't want to take the risk on that new medical technology that everybody else is doing it for my kids, because the risk versus reward or whatever is not there, and I don't want to do it. Could that, and your kid runs away over or whatever? I mean,
Right.
doesn't this kind of also open the door for that? Did you mention that? Because it just feels like it's a little icky in that regard too, that there's other medical treatments that they could say parents don't need to know about.
Yeah, and that is my concern, is that you already have a lot of leeway for people over the age of 13 to make certain medical decisions on their own, but at least parents will know where their child is, and there'll be some sort of communication there. I mean, I still think it's egregious, but that has been my full argument about 5599, is it's bad enough, but think about the things it paves the way for. And you have to, in this state, we haven't reached bottom yet. I have seen nothing that they're not willing to introduce to just float to see if it
Yeah.
passes. And so, like I said, the next natural step would be them saying that if you're not willing to let your child get this kind of care, the government can remove your child from your home. I would not put it past them. It
Hmm.
seems like that's the natural course of
Hmm.
things.
Yeah. Okay, let me say this as a final word. What if, because this is what I always say to people who like want to give the government more and more control over this kind of stuff. Okay, so like your party's in power and all your favorite things right now are going to be allowed for the government to make decisions for your family, your children, whatever. Okay, so now your ideological adversary is now in power, and they take this law and they say, if your kid wants to detransition, or like, just think of something they would absolutely abhor, and they just don't have to tell you, they don't have to tell you about it. Like, I'm just trying to think of what it would be like that they would really freak out about. And now you've opened the door for the state to, or like, say, oh yeah, your kid wants to go to, oh god forbid, conversion therapy. Okay, they want to go to conversion therapy, and they don't have to tell you they want to, because they would say, oh, my kid, conversion therapy, that's abuse. You can't even send a kid to conversion therapy, that's abuse. Okay, but you've just opened the door for, for the kid to not ever tell you they're going to go to conversion therapy. Would these parents want to know if their kid's going to go to conversion therapy? Because they would freak out about that. So I mean, you know what I'm saying? It just seems
Yeah.
like, yeah, it's very short-sighted. I mean, I don't understand how, the whole thing is kind of mind-boggling to me. But like, when you say that kind of stuff to people, do they get it, or they're like, no, that would never happen?
I think people have a hard time. There's that phrase, I can't remember exactly how it goes, but just imagine these laws in the hands of your worst enemy, and I think that's what you have to really think about. And just giving an example, if you have a 13-year-old who gets pregnant, and that child, she wants to have the baby, and maybe you think that's not a good idea. Imagine if the government took her away. If a Republican-controlled government said, "Yeah, you can hide at the shelter, have a baby, and we'll keep you hidden from your parents." I mean, can you imagine how upset parents would be? And
Yeah.
so, you just have to think of,
Yeah, that's a good
you know,
point too.
what you support, and those powers you're giving the government in the hands of a government that that you don't like, in the hands of a political party that you don't like, or somebody, you know, in their ideology. So that's always a really solid way of thinking. I just think a lot of people lack the independent thought to be able to truly mull that over.
Yep. Okay, well, agreed. Wells Mortensen says redistribution of means you pay for getting your rights back, while Fed allows, well, this is the state, for close to unlimited purchase power in hands of people without any scruples. Godspeed with all that. And then this is your final task, Brandi. So everybody go support Brandi. She's going to get on it. Would it be beneficial to do a deep dive into the authors of the bill to see if they are involved with companies that would benefit from the bill? Brandi might be looking into that, so go check her out. Brandi, BrandiKruse. See her on Locals, Patreon, YouTube. Anywhere else? Twitter,
Facebook, Twitter, and then just go to undividedpod.com.
Okay. Undivided. Yeah, that's the podcast. Undividedpod.com. Okay. Thanks, Brandi. Thanks, everybody, for watching. See you next time.
Okay, bye-bye.